The Alaskan night had no mercy that winter. Wind howled across the mountains like a wounded animal, and beneath that endless black sky, a single aircraft burned through the storm. A streak of light, dying fast. In a cabin miles away, a war veteran named Luke Harlow raised his head. His dog, Echo, was already standing by the door, growling at something distant, something wrong. Then came the sound. A thunder that wasn't thunder. Luke grabbed his coat. Echo barked once, sharp and certain, and the two vanished into the storm. Neither of them knew that by sunrise, the world would learn the true meaning of loyalty. If you find this story meaningful, please subscribe to the channel and give us a heart to motivate us to make more touching videos. Let's continue the story together. The wind over Alaska screamed through the spruce forest, a white storm swallowing the mountains. Inside, a weathered cabin sat Luke Harlow, a 45-year-old veteran whose face was a map of unhealed wars. His beard was grizzled, his eyes steel blue yet distant, and his hands, scarred, trembling slightly, rested beside a half-cleaned rifle. Across from him lay Echo, an 8-year-old German shepherd, fur the color of smoke and snow, broad-shouldered and calm, except when the world shifted wrong. When thunder rolled once, twice, Luke frowned. That wasn't thunder. It was a falling sky. He stepped outside, snow lashing his coat, and scanned the black horizon. A dull orange bloom ignited far to the north, then another. "Plane," he muttered, voice low and gravelly from years of cigarettes and silence. Echo whined softly, ears flat. The veteran grabbed his flashlight, his parka, and an old rescue kit from the days when he still believed in saving people. As he trudged through the storm, Echo moved ahead, sure-footed, head low, leading by instinct rather than sight. The sound of cracking metal guided them like a ghost's cry. At the crash site, the air burned of fuel and cold iron. The plane had sheared through the trees, its tail jutting upward like a tombstone. Luke spotted a figure half buried in snow. A woman. He slid beside her, brushing ice from her face. Dr. Evelyn Cross, mid-30s, pale skin ghosted with ash, hair dark and tangled with frost. Her white parka torn at the sleeve, one boot missing. There was intelligence in her eyes even through pain, sharp, alert, frightened. When Luke touched her shoulder, she gasped, clutching a metallic case glowing faint blue. "Don't let them have it," she whispered. "They'll erase everything." Luke's mind flickered. Them could mean anyone in this cold land. He slung her arm over his shoulder, Echo circling close, barking once toward the woods. Snow drifted over the wreckage like shroud cloth. "Can you walk?" Luke asked. "I can move," Evelyn breathed. "Good. Then we move now." He steadied her, scanning the ridge. His soldier's instinct screamed danger. A faint red beam swept across the snowfield. Laser sights. "We're not alone," he said under his breath. Echo's growl deepened, his fur standing like silver wire under the aurora's glow that flickered faintly through the storm. Then came the shot. A burst of snow exploded beside them. Luke dropped, pulling Evelyn down, heart pounding like artillery in his chest. He tasted metal in the air, the old memory of battle he had tried to bury. "Echo, move!" The dog sprinted into the whiteout, his silhouette a blur of motion. Luke dragged Evelyn behind a broken wing, firing once toward the light. Silence followed, then the low creak of boots crunching closer. He could feel his pulse echoing with the storm's rhythm, every breath visible, fleeting. "Go!" he hissed, pushing Evelyn toward the ravine. They slid down the slope as another bullet sang past, hitting metal. Echo reappeared beside them, snow clinging to his muzzle, eyes burning with loyalty. Behind them, fuel caught fire, an eruption of orange and cyan tearing open the night. Luke shielded Evelyn with his body as debris rained down. Echo barked once, clear and defiant against the roar. When the blast faded, only the hiss of falling snow remained, and the world smelled of smoke and secrets. The cabin walls creaked beneath the wind's assault, the kind of groan that made silence feel alive. Luke Harlow moved like a man half broken, his hands steady from habit, not calm. He wrapped Dr. Evelyn Cross's arm in gauze, his movements rough but precise. She sat at his kitchen table, her face pale under the yellow light, lips cracked from the cold. The blood on her sleeve had frozen to a dark rust. "You're lucky," Luke muttered. "Another inch and that shrapnel would have taken your artery." Evelyn met his gaze, her eyes too intelligent to be grateful. Sharp, calculating, haunted. "Lucky isn't what I'd call it," she said softly. Echo lay near the door, chest rising slow, one ear torn, but alert. Every creak outside made his muscles tense. The veteran poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs, one for her, one for himself. "You're going to tell me what this is about," he said, his voice low, "because someone just tried to kill both of us." Evelyn hesitated, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I used to work for a branch of the CIA," she began. "Neural acoustics research. The project was called Echo Protocol." She leaned forward, whispering as if the storm could listen. "It started as therapy for PTSD, sound frequencies meant to calm fear responses in veterans, in service dogs. But the Pentagon wanted control, not healing. They developed a way to trigger aggression, obedience, directly through sound." Luke's jaw tightened. "Mind control." "Behavior conditioning," she corrected bitterly. "They tested it on canine units. I walked out when I found out they were embedding chips in them." Luke's eyes flicked to Echo. The dog lifted his head, dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "You mean they could turn him against me?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. "Not without proximity," she said finally. "But someone has a transmitter. If they hit the right frequency—" She trailed off. Luke's heart sank. He'd trusted Echo with his life, through fire and war. The thought of losing that bond to some faceless program made his stomach twist. He rubbed the scar on his temple, a wound from a blast that had left him half deaf in one ear. Now, the silence between his pulses felt heavier than any noise. Miles away, the small Alaskan town of Talkeetna slept beneath the storm. Inside the sheriff's office, Abby Torres stood over a cluttered desk, her dark hair tied back, the glow of her monitor painting lines of exhaustion on her bronze skin. She was in her 40s, tall, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who didn't waste words. Her badge hung loosely from her neck, and the smell of cold coffee lingered. A new message blinked on the screen. Case 417, closed. Order, Washington Directive. She frowned. "Closed? We don't even have bodies," she muttered. The name Luke Harlow was in the crash log. Her jaw set. She had known Luke since deployment, the soldier who disappeared into the mountains after the war. "Not this time," she said, grabbing her parka and sidearm. Back at the cabin, the night deepened. Luke checked the locks, the old reflexes coming alive. Echo suddenly stiffened, ears twitching. Then it came, an almost inaudible hum, low and unnatural, threading through the wind like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Echo let out a strangled whine, pawing at his head, his body trembling. Luke felt it too, a pressure behind his eyes, like the storm itself had learned to whisper. "Kill the lights," Evelyn hissed. Luke obeyed. The cabin plunged into darkness. Through the frosted window, 2 beams of light cut through the snow, headlights creeping up the frozen road. Luke reached for his rifle. "They found us," he said. Echo growled low, the sound vibrating through the floorboards, half pain, half warning. Outside, engines idled, and the night held its breath before the next shot. The snow outside glowed faintly under the pale moon, the storm easing just enough for danger to find them. Luke crouched beside the window, rifle steady, his breath misting in the cold. Echo stood rigid near the door, head low, ears pricked. The hum had stopped, replaced by a rhythm Luke knew too well, the synchronized crunch of boots moving in formation. Evelyn sat trembling on the floor, clutching her blue-glowing case to her chest. Luke turned to her, his voice quiet but firm. "If they came this far, they're not amateurs. Stay down. Don't move unless I say." The cabin's dim lantern flickered once, then died as Luke cut the power. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the faint green light leaking from Evelyn's case. Outside, the attackers fanned out. Their leader stepped forward, a man with a heavy build wrapped in tactical gear, his breath fogging in the frozen air. Reed Dawson, early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, his face half hidden behind a frost-bitten beard. Beneath his hood, his eyes were cold grey steel, the kind of eyes that had seen too much dessert and too many funerals. Once, he had served beside Luke in Afghanistan, back when they believed the war still meant something. Reed's voice came over a loudspeaker, deep and oddly calm. "Luke Harlow, it's been a while. Come on out, old friend. No one needs to die tonight." Luke's hand tightened on the rifle. He knew that tone. Mercy hiding behind orders. Inside, Evelyn whispered, "Who is that?" "A man I once pulled out of a burning Humvee," Luke said. "Guess he forgot." The radio static outside shifted, and a strange pulse filled the air again. Low, vibrating, unnatural. Echo flinched, whining, his body trembling as if an invisible hand was pulling his mind apart. "They've got a frequency emitter," Evelyn said. "They're trying to override him." Luke's stomach turned cold. "Not on my watch." He opened a drawer, retrieving a small cylindrical device. Old, dented, marked US Army Field Tech. It was an EMP grenade, the kind used to fry signal detonators. He had kept it out of habit, a relic of his time before solitude. Luke slung his rifle and stepped toward the door. "Stay behind me." He cracked it open and raised his hands into the freezing night. Reed stood 10 yards away, flanked by 6 men in white camo. "You don't have to do this," Luke said. Reed smirked. "You always did think you had a choice." He lifted a small transmitter, its red light blinking. Behind Luke, Echo let out a broken whine, then collapsed, disoriented. Evelyn gasped. Luke lowered his head, his voice almost a whisper. "Sorry, partner." His thumb pressed the EMP's trigger. The world went white. A silent pulse burst outward, killing every signal for a mile. The red light on Reed's transmitter died instantly. Echo snapped back to life with a roar, launching through the door like a shadow given teeth. Chaos exploded. Gunfire shattered the stillness, muzzle flashes strobing across the snow. Luke rolled behind a fallen beam, firing twice. 2 shadows fell. Reed cursed, retreating toward the tree line. Evelyn crawled to the doorway, her breath ragged, clutching the case close as Echo returned, limping, fur singed, but alive. "We're moving," Luke barked. He grabbed Evelyn, and together they ran into the white abyss. Behind them, Reed's men regrouped, shouting over the storm. Luke looked back once. The cabin that had sheltered his ghosts for years now stood ablaze, its roof collapsing inward in a final groan. The flames painted the snow orange and red, like a dying heart refusing to stop. Luke whispered, almost to himself, "So much for peace." Echo pressed against his leg, his breath steaming. Evelyn stumbled beside him, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. Ahead, the dark ridge waited, a silent, jagged escape into the unknown. The old radar station clung to the mountainside like a broken tooth, half buried in snow and memory. Inside, the air was stale with rust and dust, and the wind outside howled through shattered vents, moaning like ghosts that refused to rest. Luke sat against the concrete wall, a torn bandage around his shoulder seeping through with dark red. His face was pale, his breath shallow but steady, the look of a man used to bleeding quietly. Across from him, Dr. Evelyn Cross crouched beside Echo, stitching the torn flap of the dog's ear with trembling hands. The silver-grey shepherd stayed still, only wincing when the needle passed through flesh. "He's tougher than both of us," Luke muttered, forcing a faint grin. Evelyn didn't answer. Her hands shook too much to find humour in anything. When she tied off the last stitch, her eyes glistened in the dim flashlight beam. "They made me believe it was for good," she whispered. Luke tilted his head, his voice quiet, scraping against the silence. "Why'd you help them?" Evelyn exhaled, her shoulders heavy. At first, Echo Protocol wasn't a weapon. It was therapy. Frequencies to ease panic in soldiers, to stabilize trauma. I wanted to heal people who couldn't sleep through their own memories. She looked away, her voice thinning. Then they turned it into something else. The CIA outsourced development to Vanguard Systems, a defense contractor with a spotless public face and a rotten core. They started embedding neural chips into canines and human subjects, measuring obedience like data points. When I spoke out, they erased me. Luke's gaze hardened. And now they want to erase the evidence. Evelyn nodded, her eyes hollow. That case I carried. It's the last clean record of the original algorithm. Proof of what they did. Echo suddenly growled, deep and low. The sound rolled through the concrete room. Luke followed the dog's line of sight to a dark corner beneath a fallen vent. He pushed himself up, limping, and aimed his flashlight. There, half frozen against the wall, was a body. The man's skin was pale blue, his face stiff with death. His ID badge hung crooked from his jacket. Vanguard Systems, Field Engineer, Aaron Lenz. The back of his coat was burned through by a bullet hole. Shot from behind, Luke murmured. Evelyn stared, hand over her mouth. He was one of ours, she said softly. Luke's mind churned. If a Vanguard engineer was up here, then this mountain had been a testing ground. He turned his flashlight toward the ceiling, wires, broken consoles, and a dish array that still hummed faintly with power. They used this place, he said grimly, to broadcast their tests. Miles away, in the fading storm, Sheriff Abby Torres gripped the wheel of her snowmobile, wind slicing across her face. Her brown eyes squinted against the snow, her jaw set with the kind of determination born from years of chasing things no one else dared to. Riding behind her were 2 officers and 3 police canines, sleds trailing behind them like comets. Abby was tall, her build lean and strong, her parka hood dusted white. She'd been ordered to stand down, but she'd buried too many soldiers to obey bureaucrats. "Hang on, Luke," she muttered into the wind. "I'm coming." Her radio crackled with faint interference, the same pulse Luke had heard in his cabin days before. The dogs beside her began to whine, uneasy. Abby's gloved hand reached instinctively for her sidearm. "Easy, boys," she said. But somewhere in that white wilderness, the same low frequency was stirring again, waking things that should have stayed dead. Back in the radar station, Luke tightened his grip on his rifle. "We can't stay," he said. Evelyn looked at him, eyes wide. "You're bleeding." "So's the mountain," he answered. Outside, the wind carried a distant echo of engines. Snowmobiles, approaching fast. Luke didn't know if they were friend or foe. Only that time had run out. Echo stood beside him, tail low, eyes locked on the door. The old radar dish above them flickered once, blue sparks cutting through the dark. Somewhere, a signal had just gone live. The night over Fort Meridian was dark enough to swallow stars. The old military base, once home to the proud K-9 division of the U.S. Army, now stood in ruin. Its barbed fences sagging under snow, its watchtowers leaning like dying giants. Luke Harlow crouched behind a rusted jeep near the gate, his breath clouding in the cold. His injured shoulder throbbed with every movement, but his eyes were sharp and steady. Beside him, Dr. Evelyn Cross adjusted the strap of her torn backpack. Her face was streaked with soot, her lips chapped, yet determination burned in her pale green eyes. "This is where you trained Echo?" she asked, quietly. Luke nodded once. "Yeah, back when loyalty still meant something." Echo crouched between them, his silver-grey coat bristling in the wind, the stitched ear twitching at every distant sound. The faint hum of power resonated through the frozen air. A generator, still alive somewhere inside the base. They slipped through a broken section of fence and moved along the shadows. Fort Meridian had once trained hundreds of handlers and dogs, but now it was under the control of Vanguard Systems, guarded by mercenaries led by Reed Dawson. The walls were lit with cold floodlights, and the sound of barking echoed across the compound, too uniform, too mechanical. From their cover, Luke peered through binoculars and froze. Inside, a large hangar stood rows of cages, and in them, dozens of canines with small metal implants on their necks. Their eyes were vacant, glassy, reflecting the harsh white light like mirrors. "They're not alive," Evelyn whispered. "They're programmed." Luke clenched his jaw. "They were soldiers once." A noise crackled over the intercoms, and Reed's voice filled the base, calm and venomous. "Welcome home, Captain Harlow." The floodlights flared brighter, painting the snow blue-white. Luke gritted his teeth. Reed stepped out from the main building, wearing black tactical gear, the Vanguard emblem stitched on his shoulder. His grey eyes glimmered with something colder than hatred. Pity. "You should have stayed in your hole, Luke. There's no place for relics anymore." Behind him, a technician, a thin man in his 20s with a pale, sleepless face, worked at a control console. He wore the name tag Miles Jenner, his movements nervous but efficient. Evelyn hissed, "He's activating them!" The hangar doors slid open. The dogs emerged, dozens of them, moving in formation, their paws silent in the snow. Their eyes glowed faintly red under the implant's light. Echo growled low, tail stiff, but didn't move. Luke's pulse thundered. "Echo," he whispered, his voice breaking the air like a prayer. "Stay with me." The shepherd trembled, caught between instinct and programming, then steadied, muscles tightening. He barked once, a sharp, defiant sound that cracked through the signal. For a heartbeat, the other dogs froze. Luke saw his chance. "Now!" he shouted. Echo lunged forward, colliding with the nearest controlled K9. Snow exploded around them. Evelyn ran toward the control room, dodging gunfire. Reed cursed and fired at Luke, bullets sparking off metal. Inside, Evelyn ripped open the console panel and slammed a drive into the port, downloading every file she could. Miles Jenner hesitated, torn between orders and conscience. "You don't know what you're doing," he shouted. "I know exactly what they're doing," she snapped, pulling the final data line. Sparks erupted. The screens went black. Outside, Echo bit through the transmitter cable attached to one of the K9's collars. The signal broke, and suddenly the animal blinked, confused. One by one, the others began to shake free, turning on the mercenaries with primal rage. Reed realized too late. The army he commanded was devouring itself. He retreated toward a snowcat at the edge of the base, clutching a black data drive to his chest. Luke raised his rifle, but hesitated. Reed looked back once, eyes hollow. "You can't stop what's coming," he said before disappearing into the storm. Flames spread across Fort Meridian as fuel tanks ignited. Evelyn stumbled out of the building, clutching the drive she'd copied. Luke helped her up, blood dripping from his arm. Around them, freed dogs stood panting in the snow, uncertain but alive. Echo limped to Luke's side, pressing his head against the veteran's leg. Behind them, the hangar collapsed, fire swallowing the night. Luke whispered hoarsely, "Good boy." Echo lifted his head, eyes glowing gold in the firelight, as the once proud fortress of soldiers and dogs burned to ash. The storm over Talkeetna's Peak had turned the world into a white inferno. Snow whipped sideways, stinging like glass. Luke Harlow crouched behind a broken radar dish, his coat ripped, the wind tearing at his face. His breath came in harsh bursts, fogging the cracked goggles over his eyes. His shoulder bled through fresh bandages, but he didn't care. Somewhere inside the main radar station, Evelyn was alive, and the man who had taken her was about to unleash something monstrous. Echo lay low beside him, chest rising fast, fur stiff from frost, eyes glinting silver in the dim light. "You with me, boy?" Luke muttered. Echo barked once, soft but certain. Inside the station, Reed Dawson stalked through the metal corridors, snow dripping off his gear. His grey eyes flickered with something close to regret, but his jaw stayed locked. Behind him walked Director Alan Crane, the man whose name had haunted whispered intelligence files for years. Crane was in his late 50s, tall and lean, his hair perfectly slicked back, though frost still clung to it. His features were angular, precise, like a sculptor who hated imperfections. The faint scar under his left eye made him look almost human, though his calm, detached gaze betrayed a lifetime spent turning ethics into calculations. Dressed in a black overcoat over his suit, he moved through the chaos like a man inspecting his own cathedral. "Prepare the array," Crane ordered, his voice low and cold. "Tonight, the world learns obedience." Evelyn sat bound to a steel chair beside the control console. Her face was pale, lips split from the cold, but her eyes burned with fury. Crane studied her like an artifact. "You built the foundation of this," he said quietly. "You should be proud." Evelyn spat blood onto the floor. "You turned it into a cage." Crane smiled faintly. "Freedom breeds chaos. I build order." His gloved hand brushed over the control panel. On the main monitor, thousands of frequency patterns danced like serpents. "When I activate this, every chip, from field soldiers to canine units, will align under one command. No more war, no more disobedience." He leaned closer. "Just peace, the kind that listens." Outside, headlights pierced the blizzard. Sheriff Abby Torres and her rescue convoy approached. 3 snowmobiles, their riders bundled in heavy winter armor. Abby's eyes narrowed against the wind, her rifle slung across her back. Her voice crackled through the radio. "Luke, if you can hear me, I'm at the base perimeter. 3 hostiles near the southern ridge." Luke's reply came through static. "Copy. I'm going in." He moved through the snow, Echo leading. They breached a side hatch, climbing into the dark corridor. The sound of electricity hummed everywhere, a deep pulse that made Echo flinch. Then the lights changed. A red alarm strobed through the halls. Reed spotted Luke from the upper balcony. "You never learn, do you?" he shouted, lifting his rifle. The 2 men fired simultaneously. Sparks flew, bullets ricocheting off steel. Luke ducked behind a console, then charged forward. Reed hesitated, just a heartbeat, and Luke tackled him. They rolled across the metal floor, fists colliding, old brothers turned enemies. "You think you're saving anyone?" Reed hissed. "He'll kill her." "Then I'll die trying first," Luke growled, slamming Reed's head into the railing. Above them, Crane flipped the final switch. A deep, guttural sound rippled through the air. The floor trembled. All around the station, the canines, Abby's, the freed ones, the soldiers, began to howl, their eyes flickering silver white. Echo screamed, collapsing beside Luke, legs twitching as if lightning ran through his veins. Luke fell to his knees, clutching his head as static tore through his skull. "Echo!" he yelled. "Stay with me!" The words cracked the storm like thunder. Echo's body convulsed, then froze. His eyes rolled, white fading to amber. He rose slowly, trembling, and let out a roar that wasn't a bark, but a defiance of the signal itself. He lunged at Crane, jaws clamping down on the transmitter cable. Sparks exploded, metal screamed, and the array detonated in a cascade of light. Reed staggered back, shielding his face. Evelyn kicked the chair away, just as the blast ripped through the control room. The roof tore open, releasing a column of blue energy into the night sky. Luke dove for cover, snow and fire raining down. When the sound faded, only the wind remained, and the faint heartbeat of something still alive beneath the wreckage. The world lay silent beneath a sheet of white and smoke. The radar station was gone. Only shards of steel jutted from the snow like bones from the earth. For 3 days, blizzards had buried everything. But now the storm had passed, and the sky over Talkeetna glowed a fragile grey-blue. Search helicopters circled above the wreckage, their lights cutting through the mist. Rescuers moved carefully, their orange parkas stark against the endless white. Among them was Captain Noah Briggs, a rescue officer in his early 40s. Broad-shouldered with a beard like iron filings and eyes that had seen too many recoveries and too few survivals. He was steady, methodical, a man who had learned to keep hope folded deep inside, where no one could touch it. When his team uncovered a mound of metal and found a faint heat signal beneath, he didn't speak. He just dug faster. Beneath the debris, they found Luke Harlow, bruised and half-conscious, clutching the still body of a silver-grey dog. Evelyn lay nearby, her pulse weak but steady. Her face was cut and bloodied, but her eyes fluttered open as the light hit her. She looked toward Luke and the dog, her voice cracking. "Echo," she whispered. Briggs knelt beside Luke, checking his vitals. "He's alive, barely. Get the med unit down here." Luke stirred, his voice hoarse. "Don't take him." His hand tightened around Echo's fur, the motion almost desperate. Briggs hesitated, his weathered face softening. "He's just a dog, son." Luke's eyes opened then, cold, fierce, filled with the kind of pain that didn't fade. "He's not just anything." The rescuer said nothing more. He helped lift Luke and the dog onto the stretcher as Evelyn reached out to touch Echo's paw. Snowflakes fell gently over them, melting on their skin like quiet blessings. When Luke woke again, it was 3 days later in a field hospital near Anchorage. The walls were white, sterile, humming faintly with machines. Evelyn sat by his bed, her arm in a sling, her hair a tangled mess of brown and silver from frostburn. Her green eyes softened when he turned his head. "You stopped breathing twice," she said quietly. Luke's gaze moved to the foot of the bed, where a blanket covered a shape too still. His throat tightened. "He didn't make it." Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she leaned forward and whispered, "Say it." Luke frowned. "What?" "Say it again," she insisted, her eyes glistening. He turned, his voice trembling. "Stay with me." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, from beneath the blanket, a paw twitched. A low, weak whine filled the room. Echo was alive. A year later, Alaska had thawed into spring. The pines swayed under sunlight, and the mountains no longer looked cruel, but eternal. Luke stood outside a small wooden building with a hand-painted sign, Echo Sanctuary. The place bustled with life. Rescued dogs running through open fields, veterans laughing softly, the sound of healing replacing the old echoes of war. Evelyn, now walking with a slight limp, called out commands to a group of trainees. Her voice carried warmth that once was buried under fear. Nearby, Abby Torres arrived on a pickup truck, her uniform traded for jeans and a flannel, her sharp eyes still carrying that mix of strength and weariness. She handed Luke a letter. "From the Bureau, or what's left of it." Luke opened it. The handwriting was rough, hurried. "You won, Luke, but don't ever think they'll stop. Read." He folded it quietly, slipped it into his pocket. Evelyn approached, brushing her hair back from her face. "You ever think about going back?" she asked. Luke looked toward the meadow where Echo ran, his fur silvered with scars that caught the light like mercury. The dog paused, turned, and stared up at him, tail wagging. "No," Luke said softly. "I'm already where I'm supposed to be." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Not the technology that saves us, is it?" Luke shook his head, eyes glinting. "No, it's loyalty." The wind swept down the valley, carrying the scent of pine and thawed earth. As Echo's howl rose, long and pure, the mountains seemed to listen. And for the first time, the snow remembered peace. Sometimes, miracles don't come as thunder in the sky. They come quietly, in the heartbeat of a loyal friend, in the hand that refuses to let go, and in the whisper that says, "Stay with me." Perhaps God never left. He simply moves through the love we give and the loyalty we keep. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness is a small resurrection. Proof that even after fire and loss, life can begin again. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in hope. Leave a comment below to tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and redemption. May God bless you, your loved ones, and every loyal heart still waiting to be found.